Now the Spirit explicitly says that in the last time some will turn away from the faith by paying attention to deceitful spirits and demonic instructions. 1 Timothy 4:1, something to take into account. Then Ephesians 5:11 through 14, take no part in the fruitless works of darkness. Rather expose them, for it is shameful even to mention the things done by them in secret. But everything exposed by the light becomes visible, for everything that becomes visible is light. And I think that there's really an invitation to each one of us to grow in our faith and to recognize that it is God who is trying to touch our hearts. Just a couple of things from the fathers of the church. Polycarp of Smyrna, in his letter to the Philippians, writes, for everyone who does not confess that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh is an antichrist, and whoever does not confess the testimony of the cross is of the devil. And whosoever perverts the oracles of the Lord for his own lusts and says that there is neither resurrection nor judgment, this man is the firstborn of Satan. So harsh words from Polycarp. But I really think that it's actually one of the best antidotes for a New Age thinking is to really delve into the reality of the humanity of Christ. This is actually one of the secrets to prayer of St. Teresa of Avila. That, she's this great mystic. She has, her books on prayer. She had a lot of tremendous mystical experiences, and yet she would always insist on focusing on the humanity of Christ because God became man. I mean, it's a tremendous truth, but it kind of inoculates us against so much error that tries to creep into our own way of thinking. Okay, so I'd like to give just some clues to a Catholic response, and then I'd like to open it up if anybody has any questions. All of this you can find, by the way, so sorry, the shameless plug, but my website, fathernicholas.com, and there you can also find the connection to my YouTube channels, where I also put out content, helpful in growing in the faith. So it's, Father Nicholas, all written out.com. And you can kind of connect everything there. And I've actually put up, like, one of the little subpages now is about New Age. And so I'll have kind of like this whole essay there, as well as a bibliography for church documents and also other helpful literature in the area. But a Catholic response, first of all, and this is like one of the things that I think is fascinating about this, is that it can actually push us more towards God, towards faith and trust in God. All right, because here's the big thing about manifesting, because a lot of times, we hear this, and if you're talking to somebody from a more secular mindset, and, okay, well, manifesting, it's basically the same thing as prayer. It's actually nothing like prayer, right? Because in manifesting, what's happening, and sometimes this will be through a vision board, where, okay, I'm going to picture my life, and then because this is what I want, and because I'm attracting good vibes, we could say, this is what's going to happen to me. Okay, totally different from prayer. Because in prayer, what's happening? In prayer, so because with the manifesting, it's all about me. And the universe has to give to me what I'm manifesting to the universe. The other day I was talking to somebody, he's like, I was telling some friends at work, and they're like, oh yeah, I'm going to manifest for you. We're like, okay. I mean, it is very much an alternative to our faith, right? It doesn't go together. Because what happens in prayer? In prayer, we recognize that we ourselves are needy creatures, and we come before a benevolent God, a good God, who wants to give us what we need, right? And so we present our needs, and then we trust that God is going to give us what we truly need, and we're even going to trust that He probably knows better than we do. And here we have to think again, when we're 3 years old, well, some of us still when we're 40-something years old, and you want to go for that third dessert, and mom and dad are like, well, no, that's not good for you right now. Or you have to go to bed. And some of us could still use mom and dad telling us to do some of these things because we're not so disciplined all the time. But, true confessions, unfortunately. But it's an experience of faith and trust in God. And that's what prayer is about. Prayer is not at all like manifesting. Even if externally, for somebody just superficially, it might look similar, totally different things. So first aspect of a Catholic response, faith and trust in God. Second point, kind of already mentioned this before, but God is God and I am not him. The big temptation, and I think it's why it's so attractive, because, well, you can become like gods. Where did we hear that before? It's the temptation in the Garden of Gethsemane, in the Garden of Eden, right? That's how all of our problems began, by listening to these words. And unfortunately, the words that still can echo in our hearts. But through our faith, we're able to recognize that God is the one at the center of the universe. He's the creator. He's the good God. And then the amazing thing, what never ceases to surprise me, to amaze me, is that he wants to talk to us. That's incredibly awesome, right? And then third aspect, if in a New Age way of looking at things, and actually Father Mitch Pacwa, he really gets into the whole astrology aspect and some other things there that are very interesting. There's this idea of, which the basic idea of astrology is that there's things happening in the heavens that are matching what's happening on the earth, because the celestial beings are controlling the earthly beings. And so if you know what's going on in the heavens, you're going to know what's going on earth. Doesn't really work that way. But if on the one hand, there's this idea of, because it all in the end is a desire to control that external reality. We all feel insecure. It's actually the biggest key to understanding people is to realize that everybody's insecure. And then that can lead, hopefully to compassion, and then also understanding, okay, what does this person really need from me? And that's what I want to give this person. So instead of this idea of, well, we can just map out history, know exactly what's going to happen, we can recognize that Christ is the Lord of history. He came into history. So this is also something that if you were going to make up a religion, you wouldn't think of this. That God, who is eternal, through the incarnation of the Son of God, actually becomes part of history. That's something that's amazing, but it also makes him the Lord of history. One interesting anecdote that I found was tremendously interesting was Adolf Hitler was a great believer in astrology. So if you don't want to be like Hitler, don't follow astrology. But to the point that this would, get into his planning. So it actually even affects the invasion of the Allies on D-Day, because they knew that Hitler, so through all their spy networks and whatnot, they knew that Hitler was a great follower of astrology. So they talked to astrologers and what are the astrologers telling Hitler? And so D-Day was actually a few days before it should have been, according to the astrological predictions. It was at a different place than it should have been. But the plan that they should have made according to the astrologers, they leaked that. And so that got to Hitler, and so it confirmed what he was hearing from his astrology friends. And so he was actually convinced that something else was going to happen. So even there were tanks that stayed in the wrong place for 3 days after the invasion, because he was so convinced that something else was happening, because that's what had to be happening according to the stars, right? So I think it just shows how powerfully these ideas can grip us if we're not careful, but it also shows that at the end of the day, there's no power there. I think that it really goes back a lot to that, that aspect that we all are insecure and we all want to feel like we're in control. And I think one of the great challenges, but also one of the great beauties of being Christian, of being Catholic, is learning to trust in God and learning to understand, well, I'm not in control, but I'm in the hands of a good God who is taking care of me.